Morning, Kalimerasas. Today we have the honor and privilege and blessing to have one of the students from Holy Cross Theological School, Hellenic College, to be with us with his wife. We welcome Emmanuel Manoli Aspioris and his wife, Alessa. I think that's how I pronounce it, Alexandra. And we welcome them to our community. He has visited the parish of St. Anna in Roseville for a few days. He came through and visited some Kubati in Fremont, and he has been with us the last couple of days here at Holy Cross for the services of Theophany, Epiphany. So I've asked Manoli to offer the sermon this morning.
Happy New Year. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. So, as Father just said, and as many of you know at this point, my wife and I are visiting from Boston. We're visiting this wonderful community, and we're happy to be here, and we're blessed to have met many of you at this point. Now, it goes without saying that the weather here in California is much better year-round than in Boston, especially this time of year. Despite the rainy weather in the last week that we have spent in this beautiful part of the world, I must have said thank God that we're not in the snow today at least 1,000 times. As I'm here with all of you this morning, the weather in Boston is probably between 25 and 35 degrees, which I have to say is probably unseasonably warm for this time of year. We all would have had to dig out our cars to come to church this morning. All of us today would certainly be wearing many layers beneath our thickest coats. In preparation for this sermon, and after counting my blessings many times for not having to deal with the snow and the weather back east, I began to think about clothing and the most basic function that it provides to all of us. That is to protect our bodies from outside elements. More particularly, the garment of light in which we are all vested in upon our baptism. In Genesis, God gave Adam and Eve garments of skins after they have turned away from him and left paradise. Because of the fall caused by their disobedience, they had become aware of their nakedness and thus were cast into a world that we know today. The spiritual meaning of their nakedness was that Adam and Eve chose to disobey God's commandments and chose to not abstain from eating of the tree of knowledge, thus denying the divine image and likeness that God had created them with. Essentially, they stripped off the garments of glory that God vested them in through their disobedience. In its place, they donned upon themselves the garments of slavery to passion, self-indulgence, and mortality. In the days leading up to Theophany, we hear this theme in the hymnology of the feast. Make ready, O Zebulun, and prepare, O Naphtali. And you, River Jordan, cease your flow and receive with joy the Master coming to be baptized. And you, Adam, rejoice with the first mother. And hide not yourself as you did of old in paradise. For having seen you naked, he appeared to clothe you with the first robe. Christ has appeared desiring to renew the whole creation. Likewise, during the liturgical celebrations of many of the feasts throughout the year, the words of St. Paul to the Galatians are echoed. As many of you as have been baptized into Christ have put on Christ. Indeed, highlighting the necessity of Christ's baptism, not for himself, but rather for all of us. Furthermore, when the sacrament of baptism is celebrated, the priest will don a white garment on a newly baptized person immediately after they emerge from the water, exclaiming, "The servant of God is clothed with righteousness." With the chanter's response, "Grant to me the robe of light, O merciful Christ our God, who clothes herself with a light as with a garment. As a result of his own baptism by John the Forerunner, Christ himself clothes us with a garment of light that Adam and Eve once wore and lost, transfiguring all of us and restoring that original image and likeness that the human being was bestowed with. In this way, he saves us from the exposure and nakedness of mortality and vulnerability to sin and passion. Certainly, Christ isn't baptized for his own sake, because he didn't have need to receive baptism. Instead, he condescends to be baptized, not only in order to save Adam and Eve and all their descendants, but also all of creation that was affected by the fall from paradise. Indeed, through Christ's own baptism, the purpose of his creation, of the human being, is being fulfilled. And the reason for the breath of life that he breathed into each one of us is recognized. In a few words, Christ was baptized so that we, his creation, may also have the opportunity to attain the image and likeness that he created us with by means of his own baptism. Today's gospel reading begins with a reference to the arrest of St. John the Forerunner. As we all know, he was arrested for his boldness criticizing the sins of the Herodians and eventually was beheaded. St. Matthew's gospel continues to tell us that after St. John was arrested, Christ withdrew into Galilee and began his public ministry, fulfilling the prophecy of Isaiah, which said, "The people who sat in darkness have seen a great light, and for those who sit in that region and shadow of death, light has dawned." Christ's fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy should speak volumes for us today. As many of us also live in our own darkness, who among us isn't concerned about the turbulence and uncertainty of our times? Who hasn't felt the pain of losing a loved one or the suffering that comes as a result brought on by illness? Most importantly, who among us forgets about God's great blessing upon each of us and our families and choose not to trust in him and in his providence, or live a life that is well-pleasing to him? How often do we choose to remain in our own darkness in these and many other ways rather than vest ourselves in the robe of light that he had given to each of us? Our challenge now is to leave behind sorrow, anxiety, self-indulgence, and every other passion and step into the light of Christ. Let us commit in 2023 to don the garment of light that Christ is handing to each one of us and embrace our vocations as children of God. Let us fulfill our callings to show the world the holiness of our bodies, our words, our relationships with others, our actions in every aspect of creation that we were created to be stewards over. We must remember Christ's baptism, which we already participated in by means of our own baptisms. But now it's time to choose and embrace the garment of light which we have received, and we must work to wear it every day. Just as one would choose to wear their thickest coats today, somewhere in New England, in order to keep warm and protect themselves from the weather. In 2023, as we all settle on our New Year's resolution, may we resolve to bundle up in a garment of light so that we might warm our exhausted bodies and souls in the warmth of Christ's love and in the joy of his baptism.